Hi there, Vin Rogers once again, and this time bringing up an interesting subject. You know, every time you see these conservatives, they make a kind of a case that there's a nexus between conservatism and virtue. Of course, that immediately comes to mind this guy, William Bennett. He's what you might call a virtue monger, writes books about it. He has some weaknesses himself. He was the head of the drug administration business under Reagan, and of course he's chain smoking his way down the hall. We got to do something about drugs, you know. And he also, you know, I guess the guy is so dumb that he can't even throw dice at a casino. You know, that would require you to odds or play, you know, 21. So you have to count the cards and everything. No, he plays the slots. Lost $8 million at the slots. I mean, it takes a lot of virtue, folks, and a lot of stupidity to lose that kind of dough. Well, anyway, there you are. Conservatism and virtue, don't you love it? Here's a cautionary tale I like to tell. It's happened a few years back, but there's a place, it's Hillsdale College. It's some, I don't know, about 80 miles south of Detroit. And in the 1960s, it was coming to grief. The enrollments were down, and they weren't collecting the money in the way of endowments and so forth. And it looked rather grim. And so they were looking for a new president, and they found it in the person of a Mr. George Charles ROCHE, R-O-C-H-E, the third. Boy, this is getting to be dynastic. The third. Seems Mr. ROCHE, who is about, well, he would be if he were still alive. He died recently. We're both the same age. He was born in 10 years difference, I should say. He was born in 1935. I was born in 1925. So it gives you an idea of the time frame and how wasting I'm becoming. Anyway, he got a PhD at the University of Colorado. Not the most prestigious in the world, but what the hell? I mean, it'll suffice. And his conservative credentials were pretty well established, and all of a sudden people began to look at him, particularly the Reagan crowd, you know, William Bennett and William Buckley, all of these people, and hey, this guy is something else. When he finally established himself at Hillsdale College as the president of the university, something of a reign of terror. He got rid of all kinds of people he thought weren't just right for a college, and he did something which automatically raised him just dynamically, just quantum leaps in the estimation of the conservative crowd. He would accept not 1 cent of money from from civil government, from state government or federal government, not a dime. There will be no government money in this institution, all volunteer stuff. Would he accept the Pell Grants, which are, you know, a generous thing that Congress has made possible for people to be able to afford college? Absolutely not. Not even the GI Bill. He would not accept the GI Bill. My God, this guy is conservative. And, oh boy, almost immediately he becomes Ronald Reagan's chief advisor on educational matters. Well, one of the things he immediately did was thunderations about presidents of universities and colleges accepting these big, huge salaries. It was just simply ridiculous how they should do such a thing. He was the highest paid academic in the United States at the time he's telling this story. He was making $500,000 a year. Already we should be a little suspicious this guy may not be quite the sincere thing he pretends to be. He was a total autocrat at this school. He was surrounded by sycophants, people that shouldn't even have been in a university. It was rumored that he was hitting on students, which is not a good thing. He practiced censorship. The student newspaper was gone from one end to the other to make sure that there was nothing said against him or any of his creatures. And there was no excuse me, there was no seniority at this place whatsoever. He just fired people willy-nilly. If something wasn't just right, 24 hours later, they were bagging baggage out of the school. As I say, he was adored, positively adored, by the most conservative of all those people. Reaganites, one and all, praised in such things as the, Buckley's magazines and all of this stuff. Well, it came to grief. And I think it's absolutely fascinating. It's like a crazy movie. In 1998, he told his son, George Charles ROCHE IV. We're getting a dynasty here, folks. I told you, here he is, George Charles ROCHE III tells his son, George Charles ROCHE IV, he says, I'm divorcing your mother. Well, this was an awful shock because, once again, here's your conservative stuff. And George, his son was shocked. He really was. He didn't have a hint that anything like that was going to happen. But more than that, father, that is George III, says to the son, George IV, listen, I want you and your wife, Lisa, to come and live with me in the house now that I got rid of your mother. Well, a strange request, but, Pop's got a lot of juice there, so they move in. And they're not there very long, only maybe just months, when father announces to son, son, I hate to do this to you, but you're going to have to take your wife Lisa and leave the house because I met this lady, her name is Mary Hagan, and I think I want to marry her. So George IV and Lisa move out of the house. In moves Mary Hagan. They get married, and hardly months go by, then George IV says to George III, his son, he says, I'm through with this Mary woman. This hasn't worked out. I'm going to get rid of her and get a divorce. I'll tell you what, you and Lisa come back and live with me once again. Pack their bags, George IV and Lisa pack their bags, move back into the house. Not there very long when the father announces, oh, listen, I'm sorry to tell you, you'll have to leave once again. Mary and I are reconciled. Well, this is getting to be, why pack a bag? Hell. So at this stage of the game, the father, that is George III, has a diabetic shock and winds up in the hospital. And he is, the father, here's laid out in the bed, and here is Mary, the wife with whom he is reconciled. Here is George IV and Lisa, the wife. A word or two about Lisa. She's vice president of the college, and she was also, many people think that she was really the brains of the whole outfit because she was the literary editor for the father. She was correcting the English and probably writing a good deal. She probably even ghost writing was going on here. Anyway, she just blew a fuse with moving in and out and in and out. And she looked at George IV and, in words and substance, something like this: you damn ninny, don't you realize that your father and I have been getting it on for 10 years? Well, George IV is staggered by this conservatism, this virtue. And so he looks at his father and says, Father, is this true? And the father's face was just like the great stone face of all times. In an instant, the son knew that, of course, it was true. With that, Lisa storms out of the room, and of course, people are at this point saying, I wonder how we're going to be able to square this deal. Well, they weren't going to be able to do it because Lisa went home. She got herself a pistol, went out into the park nearby, and blew her brains out. Hard to make a cover-up on a thing. How are you going to cover that up? Well, there's a board meeting, and George III, the father, says to board members, he says, as God is my witness, none of this is true. And a couple of the trustees, when they heard that, of course, the meeting said, well, of course, he couldn't possibly have been guilty of these things. Did you hear what he's just said? He swore by God, perfectly, it has to be false. Well, yes and no, the rest of the board, and they knew what it was all about, and so they decided they wanted George Charles Roch III to take a walk. Walk he did, and he took away with him about $3 million parachute. Now, what's interesting about all of this was, this would have been big, big news except for one thing. This was while President Clinton was being impeached for an affair with this girl, Monica Lewinsky. And as you'll recall, he was in effect being impeached for having lied about it. That was the thing. And at the time that this was happening, the impeachment was being led by a man, Henry Hyde, who was chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the House. And as it happens that while he's thundering against the president, it's coming out that he, as a Roman Catholic, a few years back, had been keeping a lady, not his wife, in a love nest, paid for and everything. And here he's impeaching the President of the United States. This was a stew, my friends, an absolute stew of conservatism and virtue, or what passes for virtue. Money and sex. I tell you, it's just one. I mean, why buy pornography? Why see silly movies? Just go to the newspapers if you know where to look, and you're going to get a thrill of a lifetime. Join me again sometime soon, and I'll have more of this kind of thing. In the meantime, be as conservative as you care to be. I'll see you.